So since we have been touching on the aspect of the first, second, and third chapters of the book of Genesis being a rehearsal for the ecclesiastical history within the earth, it is repeating history. The things therein will continue, because just like the image of God is the blueprint of the religious world, so too is this repeating ecclesiastical history, where you have male and female joined together and their marriage forming the subjection and domination of the earth, natural and religious or devotional, and then an exodus occurring there from to where an Adam emerges and emerging into a territory that they are planted specifically for themselves. Now, while in this territory, the story doesn't end. While in this territory, a particular serpent will arise. This serpent in Genesis 3, this is not an individual isolated character, just as the image of God is not an individual isolated character, male and female, not an individual isolated character, Adam, not an individual isolated character. This serpent figure is not an individual isolated character. This is a character emerging when this history is repeating. So as I'm going through this process, I figure, why not take a small detour for a tour into the Isle of the Serpent, to look more at what the serpent may symbolize and represent to this history, or to this ecclesiastical history that is and will repeat and is a continuing thing as presented to us by the author writing the first 3 chapters of the book of Genesis. So this serpent is noted as a beast, one of the more subtle beasts that the Lord God had made. Now, why is this association to a beast, and what, more specifically, what is this association to this beast? Looking at Genesis 1:24, because the answers are very clear, the answers are very plain. From Genesis 1 and then to Genesis chapter 3, we get our answer as to why there is an association there between this serpent and that beast, or what this beast may mean in connotation. Genesis 1:24 reads, "And God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind, and it was so." So when we're seeing beast, the serpent was one of the more subtle beasts, or was a more subtle beast that the Lord God had made. Connected to this beast, this term beast, is cattle, something to pay attention to. Not so much creeping thing, because the serpent is a creeping thing, but cattle, creeping thing. And as we go along, you'll see where this ends up. We're going to be looking at this serpent character from a very different direction, from a direction that is not traditional, and yet exposing some things. Genesis 3:14. Genesis 3:14, "And the Lord God said unto the serpent, because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all" what? "Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle, and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, dust of the earth shalt thou eat all the days of thy life." Now, the Bible likes to make associations. The Bible makes associations. When the Bible makes associations with names or terms, that's the author writing this, letting us know that the same connotation is signified by whatever association is mentioned. When we're hearing that he said unto the serpent, "Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field," when we're hearing cattle, we should link it to this term beast. And "of the field" is an interesting term that we're going to see unfold as we move forward. But seeing the serpent linked to being one of the most subtle beasts, or to being a beast, and seeing the term cattle linked to beast, this is letting us know that we should not be envisioning a literal slithering serpent, but that this serpent, it's a title. It's a title used for a class of cattle. That may be strange to hear, But when we see how this unfolds, it won't be so strange. Now, turning to the book of Leviticus, looking in the book of Leviticus 25:6-7, Leviticus 25:6-7, and the Sabbath of the land shall be meat for you, for thee, for thy servant, thy maid, thy hired servant, for thy stranger that sojourneth with thee, and for thy cattle, and for the beasts that are in thy land, shall all the increase thereof be meat. And when we're hearing all of these associations, again, servant, maid, hired servant, stranger, cattle, beast in thy land, all of these associations, they all mean one and the same thing. And I understand from a literal sense, there is a separation between a human being and a beast. I get that. But Bible, I'm staying strictly in Bible. The context of the Bible, the way that it is written, is not literal. The context of the things that are in the Bible, they are not written literally. They are written to sound literal because the ones inside of the cult understand the language. The ones inside of the cult understand the language. So when you're hearing of servant this, servant that, slave this, slave that, it's not as literal as our Western frame of mind would have it be. These things require investigation because this is written with a mind that is not ours in this age of society and in this time of Christian theory. That would make things literal. All of these are connotations representing the same thing. And the connotations are representing the same thing because they figuratively illustrate what cattle figuratively represents. When you think of cattle, don't think literal animal. Think the meaning behind the animal. What does the cattle do, and especially in these times? Remember, this is a book written to the deity of the crops. This is a book written and dedicated to a deity of crops. Every animal here is for service to the crop god. Only thing is when we're hearing these things in 2023 and on, we have to put them into a context that is meaningful. There is no crop god. The crop god season isn't where we are. We can't keep viewing these things as if they are crop deities and stuff, because then we hurt where we should be presently. When you think cattle, don't think animal. Think the figurative representation of what that means, because that's what this is written for. Cattle, when you think cattle, think plowing. When you think plowing, think flock. When you think flock, think everything connected to flock in a philosophical context. When we're hearing cattle, when we're hearing maid, when we're hearing hired servant, when we're hearing stranger sojourning, and then to top it all off, it all ends with beast of thy field. All of these connotations are meaning the same thing because they are all equaling to the same service. This is the service of plowing in the field. What field? We don't need the Bible to answer that. What is the Bible a book of? Whatever the Bible is a book of, that's the field. So when we're hearing cattle, when we're seeing serpent connected to beast all around, and there are more verses connected to cattle. Cattle having a philosophical illustration of something more than the literal animal, but as it says, hired servant or a maid or a servant, one given to plow the field for resource. May not make sense right now as we're going through it, but it's interesting to see the turn that the scriptures can give when piecing together this serpent character, using it to define itself. Now, cattle is linked or associated to something. Exodus 9:19. Exodus 9:19, send therefore now and gather thy cattle and all that thou hast in the field, for upon every man and beast which shall be found in the field shall not be brought home. The hail shall come down upon them and they shall die. Again, the connotation moving from serpent beast, cattle beast. Now we're seeing associated to cattle here is man. Again, Exodus 9:19, upon every man and beast which shall be found in the field. Bible's drawing out something that is not so clear, and we don't have to force it. But when we're hearing beast, when we're hearing beast of the field, it's fair to link it also to man of the field.
What is the Sabbath of the Bible? In the Bible Sabbath, you'll embark on a captivating journey through the ancient wisdom of the Sabbath, a day of rest and reflection, as described in the Holy Scriptures. Inside of these pages you'll discover a fascinating exploration of the philosophical significance of the seventh day, insights into how the day of rest can improve your well-being and mental clarity, tips on how to incorporate the Bible's rest into your devotional experience. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to rediscover the essence of your faith itself. Your gateway to a devotional life of peace, purpose, and profound joy is waiting. Get your copy now and embrace the gift of the Sabbath.
Now turning to the book of Psalm 104. Psalm 104, 13 and 14. He watereth the hills from his chambers. The earth is satisfied with the fruit of thy works. He causeth the grass to grow for the cattle and herb for the service of man, that he may bring forth food out of the earth again. Connected one to another, he causeth the grass to grow for the cattle and herb for the service of man. Again, there are plenty of associations of cattle to man. Cattle to man. Ezekiel 34, 16 and 17. Cattle linked to man, man of the field, cattle, beast of the field. The cattle of the field and the man of the field are actually the same. This is a parable that we're reading, and we will see that it is not a stretch or a force. Ezekiel 34, 16 and 17. Ezekiel 34, 16 and 17. I will seek that which was lost and bring again that which was driven away, and will bind up that which was broken, and will strengthen that which was sick. But I will destroy the fat and the strong. I will feed them with judgment. And as for you, O my flock, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I judge between cattle and cattle, between the rams and the he-goats. Now, what is this actually about? Is their deity going to actually look at their literal herds, their literal flocks, and go, this cattle is good, that one's okay. This ram is looking decent, that he-goat's looking a little thin. Is that what's happening here? What is this actually about? Ezekiel 34, same chapter, verses up. Ezekiel 34, 8 and 9. As I live, saith the Lord God, surely because my flock became a prey, and my flock became meat to every beast of the field. Because there was no shepherd, neither did my shepherds search for my flock, but the shepherds fed themselves and fed not my flock. Therefore, O ye shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. This judgment, cattle to cattle, rams and he-goats, this is not a judgment against literal animals. This is a judgment against the shepherds of Israel. The cattle in question are shepherds. Shepherds over flocks. Shepherds over flocks. The cattle in question are priests and ministers plowing the field of the deity to ensure that the care for flocks, not literal flocks, of congregations is well. This is no different. What I'm saying is no different than what is written in 1 Peter 5, 2 and 3. 1 Peter 5, 2 and 3 reads, feed the flock of God which is among you. Is the author talking about feeding literal animals? Feed the flock of God which is among you, take the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for a filthy lucre, but of a ready mind, neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being ensamples to the flock. Whoever this author is talking to, they are talking to members of the flock. They're talking to members of the flock, of the same flock, of their flock. They are just of a higher position than the others. The author writing this in 1 Peter is writing to elders, to ministers, to priests. The cattle in question from the book of Ezekiel that are to be judged are shepherds, and it tells you that plainly. 1 Peter just backs that up. So when we're seeing the serpent associated to the beast of the field, and when we're seeing the beast of the field associated to the cattle, when we're seeing cattle associated to man of the field, cattle, beast of the field, man of the field, and then we're seeing that this cattle of the field, this beast of the field, this man of the field is associated to the kind of man that Genesis 1, 2, and 3 is talking about regarding shepherds and priests. All of these associations fall back to that serpent character. All of these associations fall back to that serpent character. Now, what does that mean? That means that that serpent character is not a literal serpent, nor a literal cattle animal, but is a shepherd or a priest. When we're seeing that character of the serpent, we have to know that this is not a literal serpent. This is the character or the figurative illustration of a shepherd or a priest over a flock. And so the question arrives, is there anywhere in the Bible that talks about a subtle, cunning shepherd or a subtle, cunning minister? Is there anywhere in the Bible that mentions such a thing? Because if so, well, then we have some sort of parallel to draw between that serpent character and whatever we should observe. And we do. Genesis 25:27. Genesis 25:27, just check the language. Genesis 25:27. And the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field. Everything that we have been saying just now, it is right there in Genesis 25:27. The boys grew, Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents. Genesis 10:8 and 9. Genesis 10:8 and 9. Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. Now the serpent is subtle or cunning, is also a mighty hunter against Eden's mind, and is also of the field. These are character traits. Familiar, necessary character traits familiar to the description of Esau and Nimrod. Remember, this serpent character isn't a literal character. This isn't literal. Remember, Genesis is a dream, as if a vision, a revelation. The one writing this isn't writing this historically. The one writing this isn't there present. Genesis 1, 2, and 3 are as a dream and have to be understood as such. So serpent, not a literal serpent. Now the serpent itself, representing a shepherd, is not literal shepherd in a sense. When we see Esau, we have to remember that Esau, being a cunning, subtle hunter, was transformed later on into Edom and became a denomination. Esau became Edom, Edom a denomination. Nimrod, mighty hunter for God, not for the Lord God. There's a difference. Mighty hunter for God, but not the Lord God. He was an enemy for or against the Lord God, hunted against the Lord God, but was a hunter for God. This is very different. This individual had a kingdom, and not simply just a kingdom, a religious kingdom, and not simply just a religious kingdom, universal, multiple universal religious kingdoms, Babylon, Akkad, for example. When we're seeing that serpent figure associated with all of these associations, and everything trickling back down to one of the field, man of the field, cattle of the field, man of the field, beast of the field. Esau was one of the field and also a hunter. Nimrod was also a hunter. All of these character associations are associated back to that serpent. Not saying that that serpent is Esau. I'm not saying that that serpent is Nimrod. Remember, the characters in Genesis 1 and 2 and 3 are not isolated individual characters. These are characters that are recurring throughout ecclesiastical history. They are not isolated. They are not individual. So this serpent character is not an individual isolated character. This serpent character, think of it more as an essence occurring every time this period of time in history manifests. When the particular Eden, whatever you want to call it, when the particular Eden is settled and planted, the particular serpent, whatever you want to call him, whatever you want to call it, that message and that messenger, that shepherd of a flock devoted to the God of the first chapter of Genesis and not to the mind of the second chapter of Genesis, will begin to manifest to thwart the progress of the newly established and planted tabernacle of the living Creator, of the living God, of the mind of Eden. This is a repeating and a recurring history that will take place as soon as that Eden is planted by that individual figure, and by that, more specifically, by the philosophy of that individual shepherd over his own flock against the Lord God of Eden, but for the God of the first chapter of the book of Genesis.
Our faith is alive. Our belief is a living structure. But what does it mean to have a working faith? What does it mean to have a belief assisting our thoughts and feelings? A Faith That Works is a book informing its reader on how to cultivate an active faith. We usually have to make our faith work. We usually need to do something in order for us to feel like our faith is alive. Is this the right way to handle our devotional experience? Find correct guidance and instruction on how to carry the body of your faith in A Faith That Works.
And how does that serpent work? It says the serpent is subtle. Again, this isn't a literal creeping thing. This serpent is actually a title for a class of cattle. And that's how the Bible organizes itself. And not literal cattle. This is cattle of shepherds. This is cattle of priests. Looking at 2 Samuel 13, 2-5, a couple of verses to read. 2 Samuel 13, 2-5, it was subtle, the serpent was subtle. How? 2 Samuel 13, 2-5, and Amnon was so vexed that he fell sick for his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin. Amnon thought it hard for him to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab. And Jonadab was a very subtle man, it says. And he said unto him, Why art thou, being the king's son, lean from day to day? Wilt thou not tell me? Amnon told him, I want my sister. Jonadab suggested to him, Lay down on your bed, pretend to be sick, make yourself sick, and when your father comes to see thee, say, Let my sister Tamar come to me and give me meat, dress the meat in my sight, that I may see it and eat it at her hand. And he did it, plan went well. He ended up taking his sister and doing what he would with her unlawfully. Now, where is the subtleness in this? Well, you have Amnon, and Amnon wants his sister. So let's put this into better English. You are the king's son. Anything that is the king's is yours. It doesn't matter what it is. What you need to do is you need to figure out a way to have the king, who is your father, create an order or a decree for your well-being. Thereby, through that order and decree for your well-being, you can possess whatever is sent to you, because it is now yours. You are the prince. Why are you sick? Make your father believe this to be true. Cause him to make a sort of decree for some service for you, and demand your sister be the one to fulfill that service. When she fulfills that service, she's acting not as your sister. She's acting under the court of law. She's acting by legislation. Despite her father, the one sending her, she's acting by decree. Your father has sent a maid, and you have requested a maid for your service. That maid for your service that is requested, that's yours. You can do whatever you want with that maid. You don't have to think about it anymore. Stop your guilt. Don't let your guilt get to the best of you. Get the best of you. You don't need this guilt anymore. You are the prince. Your father's the king. His word is law. And to disobey that law is to not simply disobey the land, but to disobey God. So it doesn't matter who your father sends to you. They have to fulfill it, because if not, they will suffer the consequences by law, and they will suffer the consequences by God. Stop being a fool. Pick your head up and fake your sickness, my friend, and get that girl and do what you would with her. Can you see the mindset? When it says that this individual was a subtle man, the mindset wasn't talking about of anything but an artificer of mind and an artificer of circumstance. That serpent was subtle because just as Jonadab did, it manipulated circumstance. It manipulated circumstance to kill conscience, to fulfill desire, and desire for what is accursed or for what is forbidden or for what is not to be accounted for as being just. This is how the philosophy of the serpent works. And the philosophy of the serpent is to turn the commandment upside down in this same fashion. And by turning the commandment upside down in this same fashion, by using an instrument for the purpose of attaining righteousness. Now, the instrument used was the order of service from the king, his father. Once that instrument was used, it may be taken as a route to justly acquire the type of level of righteousness that Amnon was looking for, that his conscience may be right. Serpent did the same thing. Serpent turned the commandment into the commandment given to the pair, manipulated it and transformed it into an instrument giving righteousness, and turned the tree itself into an instrument of righteousness. All of a sudden, that tree was now seen as good for food, pleasant to the eyes, and well to make one wise. Now, when we see in ecclesiastical history the planting of the particular Eden, we will always see in ecclesiastical history the manifestation of a shepherd turning upside down the commandment of the living God by an instrument used to acquire righteousness. What that means is this particular shepherd is bringing to the particular minds of Eden a code or a law or a philosophy based on religious law, using an instrument for the purpose of righteousness, turning that instrument into a code for righteousness. This is how the serpent operates. This is the light that the serpent sees. This is the darkness that the mind of Eden didn't want the pair to understand. This title of serpent given to this particular cattle, which in reality is a man of the field or is a son of man, as we saw in episodes prior, it is against, and turns upside down the commandment of the living God. Remember in the book of Isaiah, what are them that call good evil and evil good? That's what this is. And so going around and, looking at the details of the ecclesiastical history and its repeating, I figured why not just review this serpent character, because it is not a literal character. It is a title given to a recurring figure, and not a literal recurring figure, to a recurring philosophy, transforming the living God's commandment upside down and turning that host of the particular Eden inside out.